familiar faces, which is awesome. And then some unfamiliar faces, which is awesome too. So, a couple of things. We're going to try to keep it to 7:30. Anybody who needs to leave then or even before, this is very casual. I hope you don't leave before though, because Charlie and Jen Schultz have a lot to say and I'm very excited about it. This is like a workshop that could be all day put into 1 hour. So you might have more questions than answers after this. So we just want to kind of stir up some thoughts, some new perspectives, and Charlie had a great idea today. The next one could be shoes and brews, you know? And we might
that out there.
Yeah, we
show
might.
of hands, anyone interested?
Exactly. Where we drink the brews out of the shoes.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's like the boot, you know.
Yeah, exactly. So come on in. Hey, Kathy. So for me, I get the pleasure of just welcoming you. This is casual. If people are strolling in, Kathy, grab a seat, whatever, grab a mat, grab a ball. There's seats over there. Because I really want to get to the meat of why we're here, but I just want to set a tone. Nowhere, no how are we trying to shame people if they're in different shoes. Matter of fact, if those, from 7:30 to 8, we're having Q&A, or if you just want, maybe we check some shoes out or whatever, or anybody interested, if you want to know how to walk in high heels or stand in high heels to make yourself well by doing that. Obviously, just like eating, right? Everyone who's here, I guess, is trying to be well on some level, right? That's why we're here. Just like we eat, try to eat well to make our machine work well. We don't put water in our gas tank, right? So we try to fuel ourselves with good food. But I and most of us would say we're big time foodies, which means 85% of the time I eat pretty clean, but 15% of the time I'm gonna have ice cream and splits and giggles, plug, no. I'm gonna, go to Citronelle and I'm gonna have the big bread basket. I'm a foodie, I'm gonna have all 7 courses, that's fine. Then I know how to eat the next day. Same thing, if I go to a wedding and I have this really cute dress, I have a picture of it, I should have brought it in, where I wore those neon stiletto heels. Danced all night, loved it. Well, what did I do? I rolled out my foot, I stretched, I did all the things. I still had a little more hip and back pain the next day. I was okay with that, that was my choice. But if you want to add another layer of wellness to the predominant, most of your day, I am so excited for what Charlie and Jen have to share with you tonight. So it's really about your goals and your choices, which they're going to go over. This is about just, hey, learning something new and having a little more wisdom, but you still get to make choices. Like if you want to eat that chocolate cake or whatever, I'm going to do that. That's what I mean, yeah. Or if I want to wear different types of shoes, that's great. But we want to make sure we have the best machine we can so that we can live longer, bigger lives. And that's why we're here. Come on in, Raphael. Speaking of Citronelle, he makes the bread. This is the chef at Citronelle. That is so funny. Oh my God. Raphael, there's a chair over here. There's boxes over there, whatever you want to do. Okay, so let's get started. Charlie, oh wait, let me just give a huge thank you to Charlie. Charles O'Malley, ladies and gentlemen. Brandy Keener and her daughter Olivia, thank you. They helped her, Natalie Smith, thank you. Heather and Shannon, the other physical therapists, thank you. And Lori will probably be here soon. Come on in, everybody. And Jen Schultz, wave your hand. She brought most of these shoes. She just has a passion for it. She's not a physical therapist. We've been talking to her a lot. We have an in-service for just us. And we said, we need to spread this around. We need to share this information. So here we go.
All right, so one of the most common questions we get asked in any PT session, and a lot of you here have already asked that question is, oh, I need to buy new shoes. What should I get? Well, that's kind of a loaded question, and the easy answer is, well, it depends, right? And that's what I want you guys to think about today, and hopefully that's the goal of this, is getting you thinking about what is that part that depends, right? What is the goal of what you're trying to do, right? So when we ask what is a good shoe, well, that can mean different things to different people, right? So, you could go to, a sporting goods store and get the best soccer cleat there is, to buy. It's $300. Well, it's not going to do you any good playing basketball, right? So, again, good is a relative term based on what you are trying to accomplish with the item you're putting on your foot. Does that make sense? Right? So that's the overarching idea. So the second question is related to those goals is, do you want a stable shoe or a stable foot? Right? Because those are two different things. The more stuff we put in a shoe, the more stable that shoe is going to be. However, that also means your foot's not going to have to work as hard. So that's where that question comes from. Do you want a stable shoe or a stable foot? And again, different people might have different answers. And that's okay. So just to kind of give a little background on what makes up a shoe, right? So, just grabbing the one in front of me here. So we have the upper. So when we talk about the upper, that's the part that kind of holds your foot in. And that can be made of different materials. Some of them are kind of stretchy, give you that sock-like feel. Some of them are a little looser. A dress shoe might be made of leather, things like that. So when we talk about the upper, that's this part here that kind of contains your foot. And that can have different kind of volume to it. So, like this shoe here, a little bit higher in the arch here comes through versus something like this where it's much lower here. So, sometimes people have like a really big bulky foot like I do. So I do better in a shoe that's got a little more buildup to it. Some people have a little smaller foot like my wife. They would do better in something like that. So, again, as we talk about what makes a good shoe, sometimes even just how is my foot built is going to determine what's going to be a good shoe for you. So then as we get into the bottom part of the shoe, we've got what's called the stack height. So stack height is basically the thickness of the foam or material in the sole. Okay, so the thicker the sole is, the higher that number is going to be. It's usually measured in millimeters. Then related to that is what's called heel drop. So heel drop is the difference in height from the heel to the forefoot. So if a shoe is a 0 drop, or basically the heel is the same as the forefoot, right? It's going to look the same, right? It's the same here. So that's a 0 versus something that's not 0. Right, so this would be an extreme example of that where it kind of creates this wedge, right? So the difference in heel height to forefoot height would be your heel drop, okay? So then related to that, we've got pliability or stiffness. So, this is a Vivo Barefoot, which is people who have kind of a little bit of a smaller, like narrower heel, narrower forefoot, lower volume do really well in these. Very pliable shoe, right? There's not a lot to it, right? So this would be on that stable foot side, right? You're working on getting a stable foot because it's not a stable shoe. So, that's going to be very pliable versus, let's see here. Yeah, so this would be like a medium one. So this is the Brooks Ghost, which is the most popular running shoe on the market. So it has the highest sales rate. So when you go to move this, okay, the toe moves, but that's it, right? So it's got a little bit of movement to it, but not a lot, okay? So that's moving more on kind of that stiff side versus, say, a Birkenstock where nothing moves, right? Very, very stable shoe. So again, that gives you kind of an idea of that pliability or that stiffness. So then we get into the toe box. So let's see. We'll use the Brooks Ghost again. So in the Brooks Ghost, we can see it kind of tapers in, right? It's got a pretty narrow toe box, right? It tapers in. Okay, so that is going to kind of close in that forefoot and kind of hold that forefoot together, right? So the shoe is kind of holding your foot together. Versus something like this, where, yeah, you have a little bit of a taper, but it's much wider. It's got a lot of room to move. So your toes can kind of splay out in that and open up So again, that's allowing your foot to work a little bit more. So people who have, say, like bunions, right? So bunions where those toes are kind of crunching up together, maybe one's covering over the other. Something like this is going to allow that to open up a little bit more. Versus a narrower shoe where you're going to be crunching them together and kind of keeping that bunion kind of locked down a little bit. All right, and then support. So a lot of times we'll see terminology like stability control or neutral, things like that. Basically what that means is inside the shoe, usually in this arch area on the inner part of the shoe, how much buildup is there to support that arch? And so something like the Brooks Ghost is considered a neutral shoe, meaning there's not a lot. So that's what neutral means. It just kind of contours to like a normal foot shape. Certainly when we get into the minimalist realm, there's nothing. Like it's less than neutral, like there's just nothing. But then when you get into, let's see here, yeah, like the topos here, that's gonna have, and you know, you can almost kind of see it's kind of dished in here a little bit. So that's gonna give a lot more control. And the idea behind it is if I kind of lift up here, I can't roll in at the ankle. Okay, and so the idea is to control the foot motion and limit the ability to roll in. And again, depending on what your goal is, that might be helpful, it might not be helpful. So these are components when we're looking at a shoe. Now, when I'm making recommendations for someone who, say, is used to something like this, you know, I'm used to a lot of cushioning and a narrow toe box and a lot of support, but they want to move in that kind of less supported range, we might take one of those components or two of those components and say, okay, well, what are the two easiest to change, right? Maybe we widen the toe box, but we keep the support, right? And we wear that for 6 months or so, and then we take away that support, right? And so it can be a gradual process if someone's interested in moving away from that. Or you might say, hey, you know what, I really like that one component. I don't want you to mess with my support, but I want a wider toe box, or I want to get closer to the ground. Okay, well, we'll figure that out. And so different shoes accomplish that in different ways. And so that's why I can't say, oh, here's the one shoe for everyone. Otherwise, this would be a 2-minute talk and you'd all be done with it. So that's why I gave you guys the little cheat sheet there, is so the terminology of all the components I just went over is on there, you know, little guide there. So you can look at the shoes that you have right now, and, you know, or you take it home and you do it at home and you say, okay, well, you know, I've got my, you know, gray walking shoes. Well, they've got, you know, they kind of look like a wedge. Okay, so they've got a high stack height. And, oh, you know, and so you can write down on there what components or how that shoe is put together. Then you can use the description at the bottom to say, well, is there something I want to change? And if I want to change, what do I want to change and which component am I looking to start with? From there, then we can start seeing, well, what shoes accomplish that goal? So that's kind of why I gave that little cheat sheet there, is just to get you guys thinking about what do I want to change, if anything, and then we can have the conversation of how do I go about it. Make sense? All right, I'm seeing lots of nods. That's good.
Charlie, can I say one thing?
Yeah, absolutely.
What I'm excited about Charlie's doing is introducing all the details about footwear to make you have another layer of wellness, right? What I forgot to mention was what we try to do is what's actually dysfunctional in your foot and ankle and up the chain first. So we give talks sometimes at Gardner's Mattress and More on best sleeping positions to marry with their best mattresses for each individual. It might be different. It's kind of a similar effect here. So let's say you decide with the worksheet that Charlie has for you that you want certain goals, but we have to help you get those goals. That's where physical therapy comes in, or skilled physical therapy on the foot and ankle and up the pelvis. Does your ankle even move that way so that you actually can, you know, splay your toes and have the efficient weight acceptance with the actual, you know, arch being able to splay out, things like that. So let's say you had the perfect shoe. Well, that's a good start. And let's say we mobilized your foot and we had it perfect, we have the weight acceptance perfect, that's a great start. But when you marry both of them, that's really where the wellness can be amplified.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Okay, and that kind of fits perfectly where I'm going next is kind of a shoe is only as good as the foot it's in, right? So, you know, exactly to Dawn's point, we could say, oh, this is the perfect shoe that's going to accomplish all your goals, but if your ankle doesn't move or you don't, you know, have the you know, you've got so much tightness in your calf that you can't get your heel to the ground in a relatively flat shoe, well, that's a problem, right? That shoe's not going to help you. That's not a good shoe anymore, right? So it's fitting those two things together, because especially someone who, say, you know, they're 9 to 5, they're in high heels, right? They've got to do that all day. Well, guess what? They're going to have a lot of tightness in their calves. So dropping them into, you know, something like this where it's really low, that's going to be a challenge. Like it just is. So, you know, there's work that needs to be done to kind of undo some of those things. And again, that's a more nuanced piece of the puzzle. But hopefully, again, that kind of helps with the understanding. So when we look at basically almost like a little screen, right? And if anyone wants to do this, feel free to move around a little bit. So I kind of put together a 5-part screen looking at some of these things. My goal is to make a video and put it on YouTube so you can kind of run through it. But basically, you know, even just in your head, think about this. Can you stand on one leg for 20 seconds? Yeah, okay, Dawn's volunteering to come up and do it. Great.
Does that help you?
Yeah, let's do it. Okay.
I may not be able to do it all, but I will try.
Okay, so, you know, standing on one leg for 20 seconds, right? So can someone do that? Because that's a big component of balance, okay? And we'll talk about how balance plays, or how shoes play a role in balance here. Ankle mobility. So if you were standing at a wall, I'll just have you turn around at the table here, and so you go about 10, yeah,
so
that'd be great. So if you're about 10 centimeters away from a wall, so it'd be about the width of your phone. So if we were to take a phone,
that's good.
Drop it on the ground, like there, back. Yeah. Can you keep your foot on the ground and then get your knee to the wall? So that's a really good quick screen of ankle mobility, right? Because if you don't have the ankle mobility to do that, well, we got to work on it. Because then again, putting you in a shoe that asks you to do a lot at your ankle probably isn't going to work. Okay, so the next one is your forefoot mobility. So can you, actually you might have to sit on the ground to do this, can you interlace your fingers in between your toes? Right? Do you have the ability, and it doesn't matter if you go from the top down or the bottom up, but can you spread your toes
like
out
this?
far
Am I
enough?
doing it what you
want? To get your fingers between your toes. You'd be amazed at how many people are like, oh, heck no. Right? So the ability to do that is important.
And I even have a super bad bunion on my left, but I don't let that stop me. I keep working on the mobility in which I still can do this. But if you look at it, it's pretty gnarly.
Yeah. And then can you do toe yoga? So if you want to stand up. And so toe yoga is where you keep 4 toes down and lift your big toe up, and then put your big toe down and pick your 4 toes up. So it's like a foot coordination exercise. There you go. So this is almost as much for your brain as it is for your foot, but it's really looking at, can you control your foot? Right? And these are little things that we kind of take for granted. But if your foot is smushed up in a really narrow shoe that's squeezing it together, you probably can't do these things. So we might want to work on that. And then the final one is looking from a power perspective. Okay, so this is the big thing in a lot of these fancy running shoes that are like super technology driven. The goal of these shoes is energy, right? They're trying to get energy back into your running. They're designed for elite runners, but yet, you know, we have non-elite runners wearing them as their everyday shoe, and that's not what they're designed for. So my question is always then, well, what's your energy, right? What energy are you putting into the ground? So there's what's called the broad jump test. So the broad jump test is basically you stand on a line, and with with no momentum other than just your arms, you jump as far forward as you can.
Not sure I can do this. I had to hip replacement. It's almost coming up on a year. I haven't tried this, so we'll see.
All right.
So what's my goal?
So you should be able to broad jump your height.
I know, so where do you think?
Oh my.
Well, we'll mark it and we'll see. No pressure. Good. All right, so you're right there.
Nobody can broad jump their height, come on.
Not with that kind of attitude, Bob.
That's right. All right, so Dawn, how tall are you?
Oh, yeah, no,
You know what? I thought I was 5'6", but I just got it measured as like 5'4".
All right, so your broad jump was 410. You got some work to do.
We're all a work in progress.
So you are not cleared to wear high-level, overly technology-driven running
Did I wear
shoes.
my heels?
No. That's a different discussion.
You have a question?
Yeah.
How far can you?
Yeah, right. So I'm trying to think. Yeah, no. Last time I did this, because I did this with my kids, not that long ago actually, because I'm a PT, so I'm a dork. I think it was like 6 feet, and I'm 5'9" on a good day. So yes.
Do it.
Yeah, Charlie. Warm up first as a good PT
Nah,
would do.
I was working all day.
Whoa!
There you go. I don't know what that was. But that's the idea, is you should be able to broad jump your height. Is the idea. So, basically, if people can't meet those criteria, why are we putting you in a shoe that's designed for an elite runner? That's always my question, right? If the foot's not there, why are we doing that? So then we have to figure out, what do we need to improve? And so we look at those components. You might be able to do 3 out of 5 of them. Okay, well, let's look at those other 2 and see what we can figure out. So that's the idea with that screen. So when I get that kind of put together, I can always send it out and you can play around with it at home and see where you're at. But that's the kind of stuff I want you guys thinking about is, the shoe that I'm wearing, have I earned the right to wear it?
So when you say elite running shoes, are you talking like HOKAs or?
Yeah, like a HOKA, a Brooks, any of those kind of really technology-driven shoes. I mean, like an extreme example would be like they're selling the carbon-plated running shoes now, right? That you're seeing anyone who's familiar with marathon running. Marathon records are just falling, just absolutely falling since they introduced carbon plates in the bottom of these shoes. Why? Because you get better energy transfer. It improves the efficiency of running by percentage points. And so when we're talking about, world records and seconds and milliseconds and things like that, it adds up over the course of 26 miles. So again, these are elite runners who their full-time job is to take care of their body, take care of their feet, do all the right things. So they're going to maximize the benefit out of all this technology. Are we all doing those things? I know I'm not, right? So, so my goals are going to be different than theirs. So that's what I mean when I'm kind of talking about some of that stuff. But it's good marketing, right? Oh, don't you want to wear the same shoes that the marathon world record was broken in? Of course, right? That's cool. But is that shoe going to actually do something for you? Maybe more between your ears than between your toes. Okay, so then when we talk about, okay, well, what is the best shoe for you, right? Well, it's the one that helps you achieve your goal. What's your goal? So a couple of the goals that I've come across with my patients, the biggest one is balance. People feel like their balance is a problem. Oh, I can't stand on one foot the way I used to, things like that. When I'm on the sidewalks in Lancaster, which are lovely, right? It's challenging. So what can we do with a shoe to improve balance? Well, if your goal is to have better balance, we gotta get you closer to the ground. Okay, so what we know from research is anything more than 4 millimeters, right? And let's see here, this shoe is 5 millimeters, right? So technically this is over the limit. but anything more than 4 millimeters negatively impacts your balance. It's not a lot. Yeah, the thickness of the sole. Right? The thickness of the sole. And you guys can come up here and feel these. So actually, here, this is about 4 millimeters. So anything more than that is going to have a negative impact on your balance, meaning it increases your risk of falls.
You're gonna get to that.
Again, it depends what your goal is. So now that doesn't mean we have to.
Quick
Yes.
question. Is that based on the fact of the height or the aspect of the give that it creates?
Both. That's a great question. So it's both. So if we take something, let's see here. Let me find a good example. Yeah, I'll just use the Brooks Ghost again. So, you know, if we take you and put a whole bunch of foam between your foot and the ground, two things are going to change. Number one, you're going to get less sensation of the ground underneath your feet, right? It's like anyone who's been here and has stood on the blue foam pad, it's harder to balance on the blue foam pad. Well, what is this? This is a gray foam pad, right? That's it. It's harder to stand on all that cushioning because you're getting less input from the ground, right? You can't feel the ground. So that's number one. The second thing is we put that foam between you and your foot and the ground. What can you do? You can sink into it. You can move. It moves under your foot as it also moves relative to the ground. So you might be getting different information from your foot in the foam and your foot interacting with the ground, right? So your brain can get conflicting information. And so that can be a problem as far as correcting your balance, right? If your foot is telling your brain, hey, I'm rolling in, but the foam underneath your shoe is telling a different story, you're gonna have the wrong balance correction, right? So yes, that's why it's both. It's the kind of distance from the ground, but also the ability for you to kind of move in the foam. Now, why do we see these big, thick, chunky shoes? Well, it's like walking on a cloud, right? It's so comfy, right? Well, yeah, it is. It's super comfy. It is. It's putting a pillow under your foot. However, what the research actually says is the more cushioning we put between your foot and the ground, you actually hit the ground harder. And it comes back to that sensory piece. If I can't feel the ground, I'm just going to land hard, either A, to try to feel the ground, or B, because I can't tell how hard I'm hitting it. Right? So it actually does the reverse. It increases your impact force on the ground, even though I've got all this nice cushioning underneath me. Now, you get into something like this, right? Oh, I'm feeling every step, right? And I just had a patient yesterday. He comes in, he goes, oh, I bought a pair of those Zeros. I hate them. I go, why? He goes, well, every time I step, all I hear is thud, thud. And I'm like, that's awesome. That's what we want. Like, now you know how hard you were hitting the ground. He's like, oh, I didn't think of it that way. I'm like, yeah, so soften that step. Control that step. Right? That's the hard part for him, is then controlling it. But now he's getting that feedback that he wasn't getting with his, he had what are called on clouds, which are the ones with like the little circles in the bottom. And they're like the real big chunky ones. And he just couldn't feel it. So he just kept going. So that's where that cushioning comes into play. All right?
Charlie, I have a question about
Yeah.
that. So, kind of a comment and a question. So, I think what you're saying is if someone has a shoe in which you can feel the ground, and for your example of the client that came in yesterday, really all you're dealing with is his lack of control. Once you have that, then it's set, instead of then trying to incorporate a shoe on top of that. Would that be
Yeah,
right?
and you could do it either way. Yeah, like, you know, you could either say, I want him to have that feedback so he knows what he's doing wrong, or you identify the problem, work on the problem, and then change the shoe, and then all of a sudden he's like, I love these Zeros, right? So yeah, you could go either way. And that's where, you know, a lot of the kind of when you see, you know, like, so one of the raffle items we have is called Whole Body Barefoot, and it's a book by Katie Bowman, and her whole thing is like, just get barefoot, get in these shoes, like, you'll figure it out. And that is one school of thought, and for a lot of people that does work. Some people need more of that gradual process. And again, that's the nuance of this, is figuring out which way is gonna work best for people. Okay, so that's the big thing with balance. Anyone whose goal is better balance, we gotta get you closer to the ground, okay? So then if someone's goal is, I want my feet to be stronger, right? Okay, well, what's that gonna look like? So again, we've gotta get you a little closer to the ground. It doesn't necessarily have to be 4 millimeters, but you know, we could take something like this, which is relatively low, it'd be like low to medium, right? It's a very pliable shoe. It's actually a trail shoe, so you know, you can see the grips here. This is called an Ultra Superior, and some people really like this, even if it's just like an around town shoe, because it does have that pliability, but you still get a little bit of protection from the ground. Okay, so the pliability is the thing that's going to make your foot work, right? Because when you step on that uneven sidewalk, your foot has to accommodate to it, right? As opposed to a really stiff shoe where you're just going to pivot over it, right? Here you do have to accommodate to it, but you know, if you want your feet to be really strong, get really low, right? That is going to make you work even more, right? So again, what's our goal? Are we kind of slowly stepping down, or are we just going for it? And again, there's different ways to go about that. But yeah, if we're talking about stronger feet, so we want that lower stack height. We want a 0 drop, so meaning the heel and the forefoot are the same, right? Because that's going to put that calf in a more natural position, so it's working in the position it's designed to function in. We also want that wider toe box, right? Because now your foot has to work, it has to splay, right? So that all those little muscles have to work and stabilize, right? So all those things are going to work together to make your foot work, right? And when things work, they get stronger. Yeah.
I'm going to ask you a question. Does Asia have a shoe that I can walk around and outside rather than the trail shoes? To me, I don't know, it's very prone to falling.
Oh, were you getting hung up on the lugs?
Yeah.
Like catching?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. How about we talk about specific shoes in a little bit, like during the Q&A part.
Okay.
But yeah, we can kind of talk about differences and things like that on specific ones. But yeah, so that's the idea. If you want your foot stronger, we got to make it work, right? If we put you in a cast, your foot's going to get weaker, right? So the more support, the more we build up underneath your foot, the weaker it's going to get over time. So if you want your foot to be stronger, let's make it work. All right. Now, if you're, say you have a new onset of foot pain or something like that, so you're trying to get a little recovery, right? Or I'm an ultra runner and I'm running these long distances, and you know what? On my day after my run, I just want something that's going to make my foot feel good. Okay, no problem. That totally makes sense, right? Recovery is a part of the process. So, you know, when we look at recovery for short-term pain reduction or recovery, we do want that little bit of higher stack height. That's okay, right, in that situation. You know, you can have a little bit more heel lift, right? Like that, you know, we kind of talked about that wedge position or that wedge shape of the shoe. Okay, offload that calf a little bit. That's okay. You know, especially if you're a 4-foot runner or something like that, where you're really working that calf hard, go ahead, give it a break for a day. I'm okay with that. You know, and if you want that little bit of a more snug fit to tell your 4-foot, hey, you don't have to work quite as hard today, that's fine, right? All those things can help in recovery. I just had a patient not that long ago, she had a stress fracture in her foot. and her physician put her in HOKAs, right? A big, chunky, thick HOKA. I was like, that's brilliant, right? That's a great use for that shoe instead of being in a boot, right? Because that was her other option, was being in a boot. And boots, anyone who's worn a boot, you know that they're clunky, they, make your hips all uneven, you can't, move around in them. I thought that was a brilliant idea to put her in a HOKA. Now, do I want her to stay in those long term? Absolutely not. But, so there's a purpose, right? It's okay to give your foot a little break. But again, what's our goal? Right? It always comes back to what's our goal. Now, long-term pain reduction. So say, this is someone who's had, plantar fasciitis on and off, Achilles tendonitis on and off, and they're just like, man. So again, usually those types of issues are resolved by having a stronger, more mobile foot. So if you're following along, we want our feet to be stronger, we want a little more mobility, guess what? We're getting you closer to the ground. We're gonna get you more in that zero drop position here, and I'll use this shoe as an example. I really like this as a transition shoe for someone who's trying to get there, right? But maybe they've had some pain, they're a little hesitant. This is called a Merrell Trail Glove. If we come back to that upper, right? So the upper is kind of a sock-like fit, so it kind of hugs the foot nicely. But it's that zero drop, right? So the front is the same as the heel. It's quite pliable. It's got a little bit in the midfoot. You can see it's kind of built up a little bit. But for the most part, you're going to have a lot of that pliability. So it's going to make your foot work a little bit. However, it kind of hugs you at the same time. So I really like this as one of those kind of long-term shoes of like someone who's a little hesitant or has had some foot issues in the past.
What's that toe box look like?
It's a little on the narrow side. Again, it kind of hugs the foot a little bit. But again, the sock-like upper has some give to it. So as you step on it, it does kind of expand, but it kind of moves with you. And so again, it kind of gives people a little help in that way, but still allows that kind of toe splay to happen. So again, that's a Merrell Trail Glove. I really like this shoe for that purpose. And again, each person's a little bit different. Like I would not wear one of these well because my foot's really wide. But my wife, these are hers. She's got a narrow heel and a little bit narrower of a forefoot. She wears these all the time. They're technically a trail shoe, but this is like she's mad that I have these tonight. So that's a really nice shoe. But the idea is, again, we want to get you a little lower to the ground. We want that foot to move more. We want that ankle to move more because a lot of these issues are driven by ankle and foot mobility and strength limitations. And we're not even getting into the hip, but a lot of times the hip drives that stuff too. But I'm not looking to keep you here for another 2 hours. Next. Okay, and then when we look at performance, right? So performance can mean a lot of different things. Are you, a pickleball player? Are you a basketball player? Are you running? Okay, that's more for the Q&A. We can get into some nitty-gritty there. But again, that shoe has got to meet your goals. So the biggest one I see recently is pickleball players, and they feel like they're falling all over the court. Guess what? I scoot them over to that balance section. Right? Okay, let's look at your balance. What are you wearing to play pickleball, right? It's a lot of forward, backward, side-to-side motion. We need something that gets you a little closer to the ground. Now, we do want it where it's kind of hugging the foot a little bit more. Trying to think of a good example here. I don't know that I have one. No, so the shoe that I really like is, and I'm actually mad, they just changed it. I don't like the new version, but the Ultra Solstice is, actually Heather, where are you? Heather's got a pair of shoes on from Zero. They're called the
Heather
Forza.
Lindsley, everybody.
And they have kind of a sock-like upper. So again, you get that snugness. And so for a lot of that lateral movement, they're going to hug you nicely, and they're not going to feel sloppy. So something like this for a lot of agility work is going to feel sloppy, right? But Ultra, thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
So Ultra Solstice was a shoe that I really, really liked for a long time for pickleball, but they just made a new version and they totally butchered it. So it's like super stiff now and doesn't move well. So that's kind of what you want for, say, pickleball is let's get you a little closer to the ground, let's give you something that's grippy so you can plant and move, but we want a little bit of snugness so you can change directions, in that regard. Again, if we're running and things like that, we can talk about specifics there, but that's kind of the idea is we want the shoe to match what you're trying to do performance-wise. All right, now, anyone who's had me as a PT knows I hate flip-flops. Okay, so just right off the bat, we'll do the flip-flop talk. But flip-flops are the bane of my existence. The problem with flip-flops is because there's nothing back here, the only way you can hold it on your foot is to toe grip, right? So your toes are clenching with every step. That's not how we walk, right? When we walk, our toes should open up and roll through with each step. So it kills me when people come in with plantar fasciitis and they're coming in the summer in their flip-flops and I'm like, all you're doing is tightening up your foot. Like, what are we doing, right?
So is that the true with every shoe that doesn't have anything, like any sort of heel?
Great question, we'll get there.
Sorry.
No, it's awesome. So, but the flip-flop is the one that, and slides will do that too. But yeah, so these just, trash them.
Unless you're walking from your beach house to the beach. Even then, he's got an answer for that.
No. Okay, so now, what would be an alternative, right? I don't want a heel strap. Well, they have kind of more the front of the ankle strap. So these work and allow your foot to relax a little bit. You're still going to toe grip a little bit, but it's better than a flip-flop, or less terrible than a flip-flop. Okay, so something like this, I can sleep at night, it's fine, but, that would be an alternative if you don't like the heel strap. However, heel strap for the win every time. Okay, so when we have a heel strap, that's going to allow that foot to roll through and do what it's supposed to do. Okay, so again, we're getting into balance, right? So I'm walking on the sand and things like that. It's hard to do. Get yourself a heel strap. It's going to connect your foot to the ground, and especially we get you a little lower to the ground. So these are Tevas. They've got a little bit of cushion, so these are really nice for I'm kind of doing maybe like I'm walking along the river or somewhere where it's wet or whatever, but maybe I want just a little protection for my feet. They've got good pliability, but a little bit of protection. But again, it's all about that heel strap. That's what's gonna help you out. And then I kind of showed you these guys earlier. This is this is what you'll find me in the summer. I love these. I never liked sandals until I found these. There is nothing to them, and that's what I like about them. It's got the heel strap, but it's basically just like walking barefoot all summer. It's great. Not for everyone, I get it. But again, if balance is an issue, if you're thinking about foot strength, you want your feet to move, they have no choice but to move. So these are called Zero Aqua Sport. And they have a couple varieties of these. They have ones with more of a strap as opposed to the strings and different designs. But the basic idea is we're just strapping a little piece of plastic to the bottom of your foot. And that's it. No frills. Okay. So that's sandals. Now the other thing I always get asked about is Crocs. What is the deal with Crocs? My kids live in their Crocs, and I'm totally fine with it. Right? If it's in four-wheel drive, right? Four-wheel drive is fine. No, right? So again, it's not terrible. It's kind of like those pink sandals there. You know, you've got a little bit of catch at the front there, but you're definitely better off with the strap down. But like, let's take a look at these, right? Like, they've got some good pliability. You can move around in them, right? A little bit of cushioning, but you're relatively close to the ground. Big old wide toe box. I love that. Right? And you know, people look at Crocs like they are ridiculous. I'm totally fine with them. I think they're great. I've had so many patients who they had a foot surgery or something like that, and they're like, oh, I've just been wearing my Crocs all the time, and man, I feel really good. I'm like, great, keep wearing them. Right? They're great. So if any of your kids or grandkids are in the Crocs and you're annoyed and you think they're ridiculous, they're not. They're fine. Yes. 4-wheel drive. Yep. Another thing with kids' shoes, Chuck Taylors, 0 drop, a lot of pliability. I love them. Love them for kids' shoes. What's that? And fashionable too, right? So they're that nice blend of kids think they're cool, and you know, and they accomplish a lot from letting kids' feet move. These are Converse, Chuck Taylors. Yep. So one of the biggest things that I see in kids, especially kids who play year-round sport like soccer, is they're in a cleat all the time. Cleats do not move, right? That's the goal of that shoe, and that's fine. But then what do? We put them in chunky light-up shoes, and we put them in, you know, whatever, and their foot never moves. And so now you're taking a kid, and right from the start, they're going to grow up with a weak foot because their foot does not move. Not awesome, right? So, you know, so especially if it's a kid who plays a year-round sport, or, you know, and that's a whole other discussion, but, you know, if they're in cleats a lot or sport-specific shoes, get them in something that moves. Get them in a Croc. Get them in a Chuck Taylor, right? Something that moves easily. A low-cost entry point for kind of a little more pliable shoe for kids is called a Saguaro. It's an Amazon brand. Super pliable. Yeah, they're a great little shoe, and you can get them, like, some of the colors are as little as like $15 for a kid's shoe. So I really like these
Charlie.
as a kid's shoe option.
Yep. Also with kids' shoes, if any of you have any children or grandchildren, when I had kids, the Robies shoes, do you know what those are? There's like almost like little moccasins.
Yeah.
Those are great. Keep them barefoot, but obviously you need, you know, if you're going out or something, but those are perfect gift for, you know, little newborn babies that are starting to walk.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So keep them barefoot is the best thing, right? Like in our house, you get in the house, shoes off.
And keep
No
them
shoes in the house. At all. Right, oh yeah, my kids, my daughter got really into riding her bike barefoot. I'm like, awesome. Like, that's great. Not what I want to do, but she was all about it. So, real quick, I don't want to take a deep dive into orthotics, but I just wanted to bring it up. Orthotics are great if there's a structural problem, right? Someone's got a torn ligament, a bone that didn't heal right, whatever. But again, if we're just talking about general population, we want a stable shoe or a stable foot. Again, that's our question, right? The question we keep coming back to. And, you know, when we look at some of the evidence around it, so if we're looking at short-term pain reduction, orthotics can help with that. Someone's got like a really bad plantar fasciitis, we offload those tissues, it'll feel better, right? But there's no evidence to say it's going to help long-term. More than a year out, people are going to be in the exact same situation they were in because the foot gets weaker, right? You're not using the foot, you're not changing what caused that plantar fasciitis in the first place. Now, if someone's really used to wearing orthotics and they don't want to give them up, there's something called a bridge sole. Did you bring?
My husband had them in his shoes.
Yeah.
I didn't bring them.
Okay.
I'm wearing them.
No worries. So he's using them. It's great. So a bridge insole is basically an orthotic that's designed to break down over time. So you start with support in your whatever shoe you are wearing, but then over time, it's going to give you less and less support. It's just going to break down. So then by the time it breaks down fully, you know, you're in a good place and you don't need that support. So it allows you to kind of get acclimated over time. But the big thing, and Dawn already touched on this, get barefoot. Get your feet on the ground. It's good. It's good. You know, we get that sensory input. We get to feel the ground, especially uneven ground. Right? That's what our foot's designed to do, is to accommodate to uneven surfaces. So we've got all the little bones and joints in there. Let them move. Right? Let them breathe. You know, another way of thinking about it is, okay, so say I work in a factory and I do this all day. Right? I do one motion. Right? You would all look at that and be like, man, why would you do that for 8 hours? That's stupid. Well, guess what? If I'm in a motion control shoe on flat ground that only lets my foot move one way, I'm doing the same thing at my foot. My foot is getting one movement. It's going to lead to overuse injuries. It's a repetitive stress. Okay? And I'll just leave you with this last little fun fact. So when they've gone to study tribes in like the Amazon rainforest that have never worn shoes, and you know, they kind of study them to see what do their feet look like. The incidence rate of plantar fasciitis in athlete's foot is 0.
Athlete's foot.
Yeah,
Athlete's foot is 0?
0. They do not have it at all.
Fungus, right?
Yeah. Right? Why? What do we do when we put our feet in shoes, right? Imagine wearing mittens all day. Right? How sweaty would your hands be? Right? You know, like people come in, they're all like, oh, I'm sorry, my feet are sweaty. I just came from there. Well, of course, they were in little foot coffins for the last hour. You know, like, of course. So, just think about that, right? People who never wore shoes don't have plantar fasciitis. They don't have athlete's foot. And these are like,
orthopedic too?
what's that?
Like less overall orthopedic issues too?
I don't know the data on
I
that.
think that
Okay.
podcast said that.
Okay. Yeah, I don't remember the data on that, but I just found that fascinating. And their feet look totally different. It's like a wide, muscular foot with these like almost finger-like toes. They're awesome. So, or at least I think they're cool. Yes.
Cold feet. I get cold feet
Mm-hmm.
in this season and on, but barefoot doesn't help that.
Okay. So Jen was kind enough to bring
Show her the warm ones. I was gonna say, get the wool ones.
which ones are the wool ones?
The new cashmere ones. Yeah.
Oh, these ones.
Right away.
These guys?
Yeah, those.
Yeah.
Show her those. 'Cause that's-
Okay. So these are a nice wool cashmere blend. And they have individual cutouts for toes.
I always laugh at that.
Are you laughing at me? So, and they do have some with like treads on the bottom if you don't want to be slippery. Jen, you can talk to people during the Q&A about the sensory ones. There's also ones that give sensory input to the bottom of your feet. They have almost like little bumps on the inside. They're textured. So especially people with like neuropathy and things like that can sometimes benefit from that sensory input. But yeah, you can get warm toe socks, so it's like you're barefoot, but yet your piggies don't get cold.
Why do you have to have gloves for your toes?
Okay, that's great.
Without the gloves, is it?
So it's still okay. However, depending on how snug that sock is, it might squeeze your toes together a little bit. Right? So then you're getting that kind of squished toe position. The wider your foot is, the more contact you're going to have with the ground, the better balance you're going to have, the more sensory input you're going to have. The other thing is, by having the individual toes, I've got 2 layers of fabric between each toe. Right? So that whatever that width is of the fabric is kind of pushing my toes apart a little bit. So I get that extra space in there, versus if I'm in a toe, it's skin to skin, and you're going to get a little sweatier and get a little friction there, in addition to them being kind of scrunched up. So that's the nice thing about some of these toe socks, especially the winter ones. Yeah, great question.
Sounds like,
Yeah.
like people started to ask questions, but did you have something else to add?
Yeah,
Before the
so
questions start.
yeah, the only other thing, and this kind of touches to what you were just asking about, is toe spacers. So toe spacers are a nice little tool, and that's actually one of the raffle items. You can wear them, these little guys, you can wear inside your shoe to help with that spacing. So if you get a wide toe box shoe, Because say your goal is, I want to have a little better balance, a little more foot pliability. You put these in between your toes, it spaces them out. If you have enough width in that toe box, it'll allow you to get used to that foot being wider. If you don't want to wear them in your shoes, you want to kind of kick back and relax. There's a bigger, these are called yoga toes. And so these get a really nice wide spacing. These I typically have people wear for like a half hour. You're sitting watching TV or whatever at the end of the day. Pull those toes apart.
I'd work up to it though, maybe 5-10 minutes.
Yeah. Oh yeah, work up to a half hour. Yep. Versus the ones you put in your shoes. Again, that would be something you work up to. Maybe you start with a half hour and then pop them out, but then work up to being able to wear them all day. So yeah, the toe spacers are a nice little idea. And then that goes in conjunction with the toe socks. Because again, it's that same idea, spread those toes out, let those toes move, let them move individually as opposed to being smushed together. All right, so that is what I want you guys to think about, right? I know it's not direct answers of please buy this, but now you've got some things to think about, right? What are your goals? And that's what I want to leave you with here tonight. If you have specific questions, please let me know. But what are your goals?
Let's give a hand for Charlie, guys.